boy. She comes to work for Al at the Gem Theater, only this is not her first rodeo. She knows exactly what she's getting into with the prostitution. She had done it before. And she soon meets and marries a card shark named Sam Curley. Well, after they get married, Sam finds out she's still married to 3 other men. None of them are divorced, and one of them is over in Spearfish. And she's been cheating on him with other men. Oh, well, his heart's broke. He goes on back to Cheyenne, Wyoming, and pretty soon a former lover of Kitty's comes back to Deadwood, and they pick up right where they left off, 2 bugs snug as a rug. Sam gets wind of this, and he's pissed. He comes on back from Cheyenne. He says, Kitty, meet me above the Lone Star Saloon in one of those boarding rooms, and we're going to talk about this. And she said, okay. I'm pretty sure that's how she said it. They get up there. Pretty soon, all of a sudden, 2 shots are fired out. People run on up, kick that door in. They're in a pool of blood as Sam and Kitty. Sam shot Kitty, turned the gun, shot himself. Wow. If he wasn't going to have her, nobody was. Terrible. Love triangles, right? So, and just to let you know about the no-nonsense of Deadwood in those early days, because there wasn't enough women to tell them you don't do that, they had a funeral right then and there in a couple of minutes with the blood still wet on the floor. They tossed those bodies on up to Mount Moriah Cemetery, where they lay in an unmarked grave still to this day.
Wow.
Yeah, that was Deadwood in those early days.
Wow.
But pretty soon, we have more and more madams coming on the scene, like a young Madam Molly Johnson. She's young, she's beautiful, she's very successful, and with her she brings young, beautiful women who are free to come and go as they please. They're never tricked, and they're given a fair share of the deal. And she has a high-end bordello in Deadwood. Pretty soon more and more madams come, and it's a good business then. It's safer for the women. They're treated much better than they were under the men, of course. In those earlier days, it was a little rough. So, yes. And if you were a madam, you were ahead of your time. Because in those early days, women were not allowed to own land or property. And they were either married or you were a teacher. Otherwise, you had no way of surviving back then. So brothel work was basically your go-to. That was your only choice of having a roof over your head and food.
Wow.
Yeah, or a governess. Yeah, there were very few possibilities back then for a lady. So
like shelters.
Yes, like shelters. It was like a shelter, very much so. Yeah, good example. Yeah, hard times, very hard. Yeah, I wouldn't want to live back then.
No.
Any questions?
What was like the medical like? Was there a doctor that checked them out?
They did have doctors. They had a doctor that would probably come and visit the brothels, but they didn't have much for, they probably had some concoctions that were from herbs and remedies like that, but I don't know exactly what they used. As far as pregnancies go, they would force abortions, like inject with syringes. They would, I know that in Boston, this isn't in our tour, by the way.
Right.
In Boston, they had an excavation site where the red light district was, where the brothels were. And they found these metal syringes, and the women would inject either mercury, cyanide, or lead into their bodies down there to kill their babies. But what they were doing, they were killing themselves, and they didn't really realize that. Well, maybe they did a little bit. And you know, everybody has all these records of all these suicides. Well, they weren't really suicides. They were attempts at destroying, abortions.
Right.
And they died, of course, and so that's how they labeled it, was suicides. But yeah, which is unfortunate. One story is silver dollars. Women use silver dollars as a diaphragm, but also it was a purifier. So silver purifies, so that was their way of trying to clean themselves down there. Yes. Any other? Those are some good questions. But when the 30s roll around, when Lysol was invented, I don't know when it was, but as soon as it was invented, women were injecting themselves to clean themselves, because they didn't have many products even then. They weren't very developed.
That's still crude.
Yeah, very crude. Yeah, it's so unfortunate.
So were there a lot of deaths in the women?
Oh yeah, you bet. You didn't live very long, and especially even if you weren't a brothel worker,
You didn't live very long.
you didn't live very long. No, to live, because it was wild too. Wild Bill Hickok, he was basically a very well-dressed man, cared about his appearance because he was very famous and he was a handsome man. So they called him a dandy, but he comes to Deadwood, he's already famous. So you've got a bunch of these lawless men that are wild, rapscallions, rogues, and he's got a walking target on his back because everybody wants to be famous, right? And he just happens to tick off a real jerk in several games of poker, and he, takes him for all he's got, and which is poker, right? And this guy's kind of a low miscreant, and he goes and he shoots Wild Bill in the back of the head. And rarely did he ever sit with his back towards the door because he knew everybody wanted to be famous and kill him. So he always sat with this, and he had asked one of the guys at the poker table if he could face the door, but he refused. So yeah, but he was losing his eyesight, and he realized that the Wild West was about to be no more. In fact, within a year, Deadwood had become so civilized that a lot of those miscreants left. And and also 5 years after Deadwood started, 1876, it becomes U.S. territory. So now they've got government over their shoulders, so they go where there's even more lawlessness. Yeah. Any other questions?
No, that was good. Yeah.
Okay, let's go into the Roaring Twenties.
Wow, it's a pretty room.
Oh, sir. Would you like to jump in on this tour or catch the next tour? We've already gone for about 15 minutes. If you'd like to catch the next tour, which is at 2, go ahead and check the ticket area. And that's a little gift shop. You're welcome to. Or come back at the top of every hour as a tour. It's a $15 guided tour, 45 minutes. Yeah. Okay, so Roaring 20. So World War I is finally over. Women can now vote. Also, turn on the radio. You could get a good baseball game, or Louis Armstrong, or Ella Fitzgerald. Also, a lot has changed in the last 20 to 30 years. Gone is that crusty old miner. He's probably either walking around like this from panning for gold, or he's dead, or he's 10 minutes up in league where it's replaced by hard rock industrial gold mining, which is the great Homestake gold mine 10 minutes from here. And but there's a great drought going on in the 1919. We're talking a dry spell. Prohibition has set in. Also, in 1929, the great stock market crashes, which leads in the entire country, unfortunately, into the Great Depression. But do you think that really affected the brothels? Hell no, because we've got ranchers, railroadmen, miners from Lead, and loggers coming to the brothels in Deadwood. The place was raining men, hallelujah. It was all about location, location, location. And Deadwood did have a large but struggling business community. And so the women were very well, lots of money, right? So they would go into that business district and support all of those businesses. There were no tourist shops back then. We had a real bona fide town with a bowling alley, dry cleaners, you name it, hardware stores, you name it, we had it. And then on the other